Welcome back to the news, everyone. Today it's another roundup episode, and we have a series of pretty crazy stories, actually. I mean, disaster and layoffs in the games industry is a fairly brutal thing. We have an update to the Golem disaster. We have the situation with Lamplighter League that has led to a company being thoroughly gutted. Rocket League is somewhat suffering as a victim of Epic Games' delicious Metaverse ambitions, and the House of Mouse may indeed want to acquire a part of our industry as well. Wouldn't that be absolutely delightful? It wouldn't be delightful, but I can tell you what is The Pale Beyond. It's the video game that we made. You can check it out on Steam if you want some narrative adventure role-playing game goodness. Of course, diving into our polar exploration where obviously things don't always necessarily go right. And another way to support what we're doing is to pick up the art and making of book at store.bellular.games. Hey, lovely big full video game hardback art book that our team put together. It's awesome, and they are now available with the collector's edition in stock with rapid shipping on our store. Okay, with that said, time to talk about Rocket League being the latest victim to Epic Games' Metaverse ambitions. Right, the developer Rocket League, Psyonix, recently announced that they are going to be removing player trading for items and blueprints in the game by the end of this year, meaning that duplicate and unwanted items will basically be able to be junked in order to receive a random item of a higher quality. So that's the way that they're kind of trying to, put some sugar in the medicine, I guess. Now, of course, Psyonix were acquired by Epic Games in 2019, and supposedly this change is a part of that ecosystem. So here it is. We're making this change to align with Epic's overall approach to game cosmetics and item shop policies, where items aren't tradable, transferable, or sellable. This opens future plans for some Rocket League vehicles to come to other Epic Games over time, supporting cross-game ownership. To which I must point out, wow, do you mean that you can have cross-game ownership of something without an NFT? Wow! What an amazing technological development. Oh, the industry's so tiresome. Okay, this has obviously not went down well with players. We have some lovely and colorful Reddit posts. We obviously have got a change.org petition. And the Reddit post does have a point here. It's saying, you've done nothing to improve the game. You've made no effort to improve communication with players and fans. You removed entire sections of the community to drive profit and greed. You've destroyed our game. So that's definitely not like a recipe to make a happy game community. And of course, that thing, player trading, what can that do? That can help players kind of get around some of the worst parts of monetization. It's like, hey, I have something I don't want, but you do want. Let's trade them instead of swiping our credit cards. There you go. Happy players. Not necessarily, though, a happy Tim Sweeney, because, of course, you will remember Epic Games recently laid off 16% of its workforce because they were quite simply burning a lot more cash than they were bringing in, and they needed to do that. Right? Pretty wild. To me, though, this all just says Metaverse, right? Metaverse. They don't want players. Well, okay. I think player trading is something that you may want in a Metaverse platform. Okay, but you will want that in a way where it is always taxed by the platform controller at the point of sale. So, think about how governments work, right? Your income's taxed. I believe there's a story in the UK where it's like, if you have a gingerbread man and there's nothing on the gingerbread man, it's like not included in VAT. But this, when you decorate the gingerbread man, now, of course, that decoration, that's adding some value. So now it falls under value added tax. I don't know if that's just like a common meme that people spread around, but apparently it's true. The point still does stand, though. What they want in these metaverses is essentially to be corporate governments of digital spaces. That is basically the big goal, because why just sell things to people as they, as they use them, when you can sort of have a digital citizen and you can then tax every point of their, every tiny little point of their participation in the digital economy. That is, I think, the real big vision from a financial perspective. And I'm sure, hey, like Metaverse, the idea of me being able to put on a MetaQuest, the new one, and have some sort of cool VR experience with someone else, like Turbo VR chat, sweet. I love that. I love the future. I love technology. That excites me. I get up in the morning, I'm like, oh, this is cool when I see some of this stuff. As much as people might laugh at, the Zuck and stuff, I thought, okay, the Lex Friedman Zuck Metaverse interview was pretty damn cringe, but looking at it, I was like, hey, this could actually be some really cool technology. That would certainly beat a Zoom call, and if my family was, say, in Australia, would that not be pretty damn cool to do that? Maybe it would be, right? But But this gives us a great example of how, for all that progress and all of that amazing innovation and stuff that can be exciting, at the end of the day, it does come down to unit economics and, how are we going to participate in that? That's the thing that's important. Here we can see a clear loss from players that is obviously to serve that greater aim. Now, speaking of loss, we do have the situation with Lamplighter League. Here's the deal. This is really rough. So Lamplighter's League came out. It came out with a Game Pass deal. That's how I was even aware that the game existed. This is the studio that brought us Shadowrun in 2015 and Battletech in 2018. These are strategy tactics series that have a pretty strong, strong following. People really like them. Expectations seemed sort of high for this game, maybe from the part of the developers and Paradox, but bit of a problem. Number one, technical issues. Number two, the way sometimes it just feels like, okay, I see you've got a type of gameplay and you've got a setting and you've mashed them together, but it kind of lacks that big bit of spark that kind of sets your brain alight and makes you really think you need to do it. This game feels like that to me. Even when I look at the art and stuff like that, it's like, yep, you're doing a bit of the XCOM thing, and you're kind of doing those 40 pulp adventure things, the sorts of media that inspired George Lucas when he was younger to make the things that he made. Ultimately then, the game's been okay. People seemed a bit more on board. We've got a 73% on Steam, but you can see there, 73% of the 160 user reviews for this game are positive. And to give you an example, one thing I'm quite aware of now is just based on the Pale Beyond experience, the number of, you can almost call it your user review velocity. It's like how many reviews you're getting per day. That will obviously quite correlate to how many people are actually engaging, with your game, how many purchases you've got. For a major-sized studio with a large, higher-budget publisher like Paradox, that is not a particularly good number. And those Game Pass deals, you do sort of sacrifice a bit of sales potential, but it's for guaranteed money now, which obviously is very useful because guaranteed money is money you can actually make plans around. But it does seem that Game Pass wasn't enough because they have wrote off more or less the entire development cost for the game, as well as immediate post-launch costs, which is a total of 22.8 million, which is insane. The game that we did, we're a ballpark of % of that budget, and we will have had similar or more sales, which is just to show how I think some of the traditional ways of just, cool project, decent team, all right, let's go, and we'll put a bunch of marketing behind it. It just doesn't seem that works anymore. There's a different cultural element that I think has to be coming behind a game to allow it to really penetrate in today's extremely crowded market. If you've been watching our game roundup views that we do near the start of every month, you'll know that the last few months have been absolutely stacked with really good quality games. Releasing something that is in the 70s, in such a tight period of amazing games, that is a brutally risky thing to do. Now, this is what Frederick Wester, the CEO, said. It's a fun game with many strengths. Even though we see cautiously positive player numbers in subscription services, Game Pass, the commercial reception has been too weak, which is frankly a big disappointment. It is painful, but it makes us eager to roll up our sleeves and do better. And here's where it's sad, because this is a developer working in their chosen genre in a type of gameplay they're very familiar with doing. Access to the game, unlike something like Redfall, it wasn't limited to one PC store or one platform. This wasn't launched against very direct competitors. It's more just, Assassin's Creed Mirage taking oxygen out of the room, as an example. And yes, there are technical issues that are frustrating, but nowhere near the levels of just screwed that a lot of games have. And of course, there's the pedigree of Hairbrained Schemes. And it means this is all a sad affair. And of course, while it's easy for the CEO of the group to say this is painful, but we're eager to roll up our sleeves and do better, that's fine for Paradox as a publisher. Ultimately, though, Paradox have confirmed to the press that the studio involved has, undergone significant layoffs in the run-up to launch. Hairbrained Schemes staff was significantly reduced over the summer as the game entered its last phase of development and launch preparations. The idea of, cutting some, less people as a project is finishing, that's something that happens all too often in the industry. Even take, as an example, a game that I was very excited for, The Expanse by Deck 9 and Telltale. That company, Deck 9, had layoffs in the run-up up to The Expanse coming out. What's then very concerning is we have an alleged, anonymous employee, anonymous individual saying that up to 80% of the studio has been laid off. And so you wonder, was this them trying to just get the game out of the door? Or could they have maybe polished this for another 6 months, not had technical issues, maybe got like an 85 or a 90 or something like that on Steam? Is that something that would have been possible? But then, if that happened, would it have changed much, right? What would those Steam numbers look like? Because here's the thing, see those low reviews? Are those low reviews driven by just not that many people coming to the game because they don't really resonate that much with the aesthetic? And, you see the Lamplighter League, you see that art, and you don't really know what the game means? It's tricky. Sometimes, and this is the sad fact, it's not about how hard you row. It is about what boat you are in, which I suppose is supposed to be a humbling statement about one's level of control in a situation. I think the key lesson, though, is that when we're greenlighting projects, we really do need to focus on what makes them really stand apart and how other people could feel like, oh my god, this is a new experience that I totally have to play. Maybe here, the combination of like, okay, this is a gameplay format they understand, and it's like Pulp. Maybe I don't want to play Indiana Jones XCOM, and then they just wander on. Is that what happened? Is that what happened to you? I'd love to know, because ultimately this game has failed because not enough people bought it. I'm one of those people. You are one of those people. We should probably all explain why we didn't buy it, because then we can learn. Next, then, the Golem disaster. So, a German investigative reporting channel, Game 2, have given us a look at what appears to be a truly hideous development process for this game that really does paint management at Daedalic and Nacon in a terrible light. So, here's the deal. Daedalic could not attract staff with experience making 3D AAA action games, meaning that they relied on their current staff, who were used to making 2D point-and-click adventure games. Lord of Rings Gollum cost $15 million to make because of multiple failures to secure more funding or grants. This is obviously significantly below the typical budget you would see for a large AAA action game. Company culture was based around unpaid crunch, with a particular focus placed on juniors and interns contributing to much of that. Indeed, a very common thing in sort of indie-scale development is relying on, say, government-supported, student stuff. That's a pretty real thing. Goes on in my country as well. We've been in programs like that. We've never majorly done it, though, because we always have this understanding of, like, that's unfair, both for, it's unfair for us because we can't take on loads of people. It would be a disaster. But also, it would be unfair not being able to provide a good experience to people, and that's the kind of interesting thing. You do see these almost like intern puppy farms go on in some game development companies where they really are just, yep, more meat for the machine. Send in the wave of students. Doesn't matter if they end up crying. We just need butts in chairs clicking on things in the editor. And obviously that does not lead to a good experience for those people, or a good experience or a game for customers. Now, Daedalic claimed that this is overall, a friendly working atmosphere. But in particular here, management at Daedalic were identified as contributors to a hostile workplace, with the CEO and COO publicly named, right? Stuff like shouting at employees publicly, that kind of thing being alleged. Now, in terms of development, Golem's launch was actually rushed to meet limitations of the license for The Lord of the Rings, all while the scope was rapidly getting out of control for the game. And as such, certain cutscenes were just never animated. One that featured Gollum looking into a window featured the audio for characters, but didn't feature their models, and that was not an artistic choice. The marketed feature of Gollum and Smeagol arguing in real time actually was never completed, and that means that those very memed dialogue box choices on launch, they were a last-minute addition, and they certainly do look it. So in short, this team was expected to make something that they'd never made before, with not enough of a budget, not enough technical support, in an environment that was very hostile. And this obviously is how you get a bad game. And here's from IGN sources. IGN sources back up the Game 2 report, describing Daedalic's low pay, crunch, and toxic work culture as an open secret within the German games industry. Game 2 alleges Daedalic exploited young employees and interns, not just in terms of low pay, but in their lack of experience with the industry, a claim also backed up by IGN sources. But then we have Nacon. So one of the funny things, Nacon allegedly used ChatGPT to produce the this statement here. This is interesting because apparently it was without, telling the people at Daedalic that this post coming from them would be made. Overall then, Jeez, what a shame. And you can see here a case where it's not the developer's fault. It is the people making the decisions. It is the people who hold the keys to power, trying to just make more money, make line go up, but without enough frontline experience and without proper, you could say proper skin in the game. Obviously, the Daedalic CEO is somebody who's involved here, but I guess when I say skin in the game, I mean, like, I don't know, ability to sit down and code. It's like, I don't know the guy's background, but you just look at all this stuff and it's like, how could you be a game developer and expect any of this to actually work? It sort of defies reason. It's bizarre. Now then, Disney, the House of Mouse wants to gobble up Electronic Arts because yes, Bob Iger, I suppose, hey, if we're losing Bobby Kotick from the games industry, maybe we can have Bobby Iger back. Wouldn't that be lovely? Anyway, he's talked about Disney needing to take game development in-house, though he's rather uncommittal. Quite interesting, because of course Disney very much got out of gaming a few years back. Now, the best way to do this and to go from being a licensor to being an active participant in the industry would be to simply buy a wholesale publisher, plug them into your existing apparatus, and there you go, done. And that brings us to their partners at Electronic Arts, who, in spite of a very, very rocky start, now have seen better results, of course, massively helped by Respawn Entertainment. Now, this report follows up from some spring 2022 reporting where Electronic Arts were allegedly looking for an acquisitions partner, one that would basically allow the company to, of course, still be ran by Andrew Wilson. And at the time, Disney allegedly was first preference, but Disney turned them down. Now, that, of course, I believe is Disney being ran by Bob Chapek, who was the head of Disney Park and Resorts. I like theme parks, and suffice to say, in theme park circles, Bob Chapek is not necessarily the most trusted executive. So who knows, maybe there's different thinking there. The broader story of Disney, though, is that they have burned so much money in the large fire of Disney Plus that they've kind of had to really, really lean on the Park and Resorts division because it's the one that's like actually reliably generating money, while a lot of other things are big disasters. Iger's been very heavily involved in, a lot of stuff with like Marvel, Star Wars, all of that. Obviously, Marvel went super good. The likes of, say, the Disney live-action remakes. Art is dead. Anyway, those, which, yes, Lion King made like over $1 billion, I think. But you see the new ones, like The Little Mermaid? No, hasn't done that well. So Disney's just kind of rough. Who knows then if Iger is thinking maybe this is the sort of industry to get into? I mean, certainly you can look at a lot of what goes on in gaming and think, why the hell are we making these movies? Why the hell are we spending billions of dollars to get people to pay $9.99 a month, right? Okay, finally then, xDefiant being a bit further delayed, this time by choice. Certainly an interesting thing. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 is coming out. It's being led by Sledgehammer Games, and it does rather represent a return to the movement shooter, right? All of your animation cancelling. I suppose it is. As much as I actually really enjoyed the era of Call of Duty that was Modern Warfare 2019 and Modern Warfare 2, I did kind of also enjoy the movement shooter era. I spent my childhood running around with an MP5 doing stupid shit. Or before that in COD 2, doing the jump shotting, the drop shotting, the blah, 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 blah. All of, obviously, in Tujan, in, a rifles-only map in a LAN center. Those were the days. I don't know, maybe that's my version of WoW Classic. Anyhow, Ubisoft have said that xDefiant is now being delayed a bit more. They still have not given a formal release date since they announced that it had failed console certification, but their statements did have people thinking it would be available at some point before Christmas. Many leakers were suggesting it could be appearing around the middle of October. But now, after their last round of public testing, the team has simply decided to delay the game to an unspecified point. And per the statement, this is because of the test revealing some, quote, inconsistencies in the game experience that we need to address prior to launching our preseason. Now, I can certainly give them props. They are not going to have a first mover advantage on Modern Warfare, and I suppose maybe skill-based matchmaking, like we'll get to see how much that matters to the public conversation and the sort of raw numbers produced by that public conversation. Skill-based matchmaking is one of the major points of differentiation that we're seeing with xDefiant. It's trying to go back to an earlier era of public lobbies. So they're giving away that first mover advantage, but they do actually seem to be doing this because they want to get it right. Their development approach has been absurdly open from a big AAA, like from an Ubisoft studio, which I have liked. Now, it is of course worth pointing out that Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, I mean, it's got the, so like, its release window is insane. And especially its release window is quite big because a lot of people are in Modern Warfare 2 right now, you know, in Season 6, getting all those cosmetics and all those bundles and all those things because they directly go into Modern Warfare 3, right? They've really been able to just pull out, stretch out, I don't know, like you're working the gluten in a pizza, just stretching that bad boy out so that the launch period of Modern Warfare 3, it's not just a big bomb. It is just rolling thunder of, every week there's something all tied into Warzone and, it's madness. I'm still kind of interested to see where that game goes. Look, I've been playing Call of Duty since literally Call of Duty 1, just is the way that it is, I suppose. Yeah, kind of interesting. I'd love to know what you think, though, and certainly xDefiant could play a really big role in the market, frankly. More competition is good, and xDefiant seems to be a game that is directly looking at Call of Duty and saying, I am going to compete with you. And I think that's, in itself, a pretty good goal. Especially when Call of Duty, by being a hyper-monetized, in some way slow-moving behemoth that doesn't always have the best player communication, like, hey, that does seem like the time to, use a bit of that BJJ to use the opponent's weight against them, topple them over. We'll have to see how it goes. And even if it does go well, it's quite hard. I mean, do you remember? Oh my god, I can't believe the name of the game has slipped. Connell! Help me in the edit here. Video game that's not Halo, Portal Halo. Remember, like, it had the incredibly big results and, well, they then kind of like killed the current version to then go big into a next version. But you do wonder, it's like when you have lightning in a bottle, what do you do? Especially if you're like, this is amazing, but is it sustainable? Man, interesting stuff. That is it for today's gaming news, though. I would love to hear what you think about everything and just what your experiences have been. For me, the big question to answer is Lamplighter's League. Why, when you saw it, did you not buy it? To me, I basically thought, oh, it's that kind of gameplay. I know what that gameplay is. It doesn't seem to be selling me in some grand narrative experience. And again, I'm only saying this based off my initial impression of its marketing assets. And, it does kind of look like a big pulpy thing, but maybe not the sort of thing I want to invest my time in. I'll go somewhere else. And that probably would feel heart-wrenching to hear. If you're someone who worked, on that game. In the same way, if people, they see Pale Beyond, it's like, why didn't you buy Pale Beyond? And they're just like, oh, I just don't like narrative games. And then I'd be like, oh, but lots of people do. No, it doesn't matter. I can seethe and mold all I want. I know there's people who don't like narrative games, but because of the way Thomas and Ben have done their dialogue, where it's very natural and snappy, it doesn't feel like you're reading walls of text. But at the end of the day, no, I have to accept that. For a lot of people, a narrative presentation like that just doesn't work. It's not the type of game that they want to play. Now, they say there's riches in the niches, just being, make something specific for a reasonable amount of people. What happens then with something like Lamplighter's League? Was Lamplighter's like that type of game and, that like 40s pulp sort of, aesthetic? But was it specific enough to find those riches that are in the niches? As an example, like for the people who have played or have watched The Terror, the TV show The Terror, or like me perhaps know of the Shackleton Expedition, read or listened to the novel, or not the novel, the book Endurance by Alfred Lansing. They'll be like, oh, that game's right up my alley. I'm going to play that, even if it's not exactly my thing. Or I like The Terror, I like Frostpunk. It was frosty. This is a different game, but hey, I like these things. I'm going to have to pick that up and try it. There's specificity and detail in the sort of public positioning of the product, and I think that's what allows the potential consumer's mind to sort of latch onto it. In the same reason you see a big sweaty orc and you're like, yeah, big sweaty orcs, and then you buy World of Warcraft in like 2005. But Lamplighters wasn't able to do that. And how many other games haven't been able to do that? When a game just feels like, oh yeah, it's an entry in a genre with that aesthetic, I don't care. What's that extra bit of X factor of whatever it is, of seasoning? What are the secret herbs and spices? Let me know what you think they are. That's my extended outro, I suppose. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for hanging out.